Welcome to this City Commission Candidate Forum for 2019. Oh, that's good. Thanks. All right, it's great to have all of the candidates here and all of you here, and thank you to the Lawrence Arts Center for providing our venue for this evening too. We really appreciate it. Before we move on, don't forget, tomorrow is the deadline. Probably everyone here is already registered, but if you have friends or family, tomorrow is your deadline to register to vote in the November 5th election. Advanced voting starts on the 16th, on Wednesday, so get ready. All right, so our format this evening will be as follows. Each candidate will have a minute, 60 seconds, to give us a little background information on themselves and a brief glimpse of their vision for our city. Then we will go directly to the questions. We have 8 questions which were formulated in large part by the nonprofit organizations here in Lawrence. And the candidates they have had these questions since Saturday to ponder a little bit. So we will give them 90 seconds each to answer the questions. And we will rotate through the candidates who starts first. So we'll mix it up a little bit. Won't put Stuart on the spot every time the first time, okay? All right, and then after we go through those 8 questions with each of our 5 candidates, we will begin taking some audience questions as well. You all probably received a note card when you came in. If you didn't, just raise your hand and one of our volunteers will bring you one if you have any questions. But if you would write your questions for the candidates on the note cards, that would be great. We'll collect those and then bring them down here so that I can read them for the candidates. So, Rob is here. Brad Finkeldye is not able to be here this evening, but he did provide a statement for me to read to you all. So I will do that now. He says, I am very sorry to miss this important forum this evening. I've had a long-standing commitment in Denver that could not be rescheduled. I appreciate the league allowing me the opportunity to have this brief statement read. Although I could speak about many important topics, it is my understanding that the forum will focus on issues facing nonprofit organizations in Lawrence. I have had the pleasure of serving on multiple boards and committees with residents from all over Lawrence, and I've learned a great deal about the challenges and strengths of our nonprofit community. I believe the lessons I've learned and the experiences that I've had can help me bring our whole community together to create a healthier and more just Lawrence. I also believe that the funding of nonprofits is a core city service. That is, nonprofits provide essential services that make Lawrence a great place to live. And we all know that, right? Whether it is sheltering the homeless, providing food to those in need, or offering arts opportunities to the whole community, the city needs these services and thus needs to fund our nonprofits which deliver them. Finally, I also believe the recent passage of the affordable housing sales tax gives our community an urgent and critically important opportunity to be a leader in working with a community-wide coalition, including nonprofits and for-profit entities, to identify projects it wants to see built and then executing those plans. That is because the affordable housing issue is complex, and without an easy solution, it is essential to develop buy-in and cooperation from all those that impact affordable housing, including local government agencies, nonprofit agencies, advocacy groups, private developers, neighborhood groups, and residents. It is only by working together that we can make significant progress. Again, I apologize for being absent this evening. Please feel free to contact me directly if you have any questions. Thank you, Brad Finkeldye. And because I didn't tell you to begin with, my name is Kristin Salmans. I'm the president of the local league here of Lawrence Douglas County. So thank you all for being here. All right. So we'll start with Stuart and go down the line as far as introductions. So they'll each have 60 seconds to tell you a little bit about themselves. You shouldn't have to do anything to it. Just cover it up and try it out.
Hello?
There we go.
There we go.
Okay. Stuart?
Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. We're at that point in the campaign back in 2015 that my colleague Matthew Herbert observed that we can all do each other's speeches at this point. So I was tempted to do Brad's tonight, but they already did that. So. You know, and Matthew's point is we've said the same thing over and over so many times. I guess I'd like to change mine up a little bit and just, you know, say that, you know, you're voting not for just one person, but you have 3 votes, so you can pick a team. And I think it's very important to consider that. And the team that you're picking is the city team. We also are residents of Douglas County, residents of Kansas, and residents of United States of America. So trying to figure out where the responsibility for some of the things we're going to be talking about tonight lies, the default seems to have been with the city, but I'm concerned that that should be discussed further. Thank you.
I'm gonna watch you for my cue, because 60 seconds, I got a lot of stuff to get out in 60 seconds.
Ready, set, go.
Okay, here we go. Hi, my name is Rob. I'm excited to be part of this process. I thank everybody for attending. I want to thank the league for hosting this forum. As I was walking in, someone was asking me, "Are you tired of doing these things yet?" I said, you know what? It's a beautiful day in Lawrence, Kansas. It's the best city in the state. The weather is wonderful, and we get to talk about topics that I really care about. I want to tell you a little bit about myself, since I know I have over 30 seconds left. I'm a still serving veteran, 19 years in, Lieutenant Colonel, serving for the Army National Guard. That's good news, because that means that if I'm not going to get transferred out of state. That's a good thing, okay? I've served 5 years on the Planning Commission, making housing positive decisions that benefit everybody in Lawrence and in the unincorporated areas of Douglas County. And while that work has been it's been very fulfilling, I feel like I'm called to do more. And so this is me throwing my hat in the ring to do more. And then finally, I've got a master's in public administration.
It's amazing how fast 60 seconds
It is. We're good? Okay. Hi, I'm Courtney Shipley. As some of you may know, I've been attending City Commission every week for the last 4 years as a fun mom's night out. And I quickly became involved in a number of community organizations. I'm the chair of Lawrence Association of Neighborhoods. I've served on the board of Lawrence Preservation Alliance and Friends of Oak Hill Cemetery, as well as the Board of Zoning Appeals and Transient Guest Tax Advisory Board. So what I learned in that time is that in Lawrence's climate of brutally inclusive public dialogue, we need commissioners who listen, not wait for their opportunity to grandstand. We need commissioners who are constantly seeking public engagement and listening to the fellow commissioners so they can build consensus. And we need 3 new commissioners that will repair the relationships with our community partners that have been damaged over the last 4 years. We need to innovate and make decisions in the context of Lawrence, and you guys all need to vote for the woman who is more focused on our core values than defining core services.
Okay. Hi, my name is Joey. I'm running for City Commission because Lawrence is a really special place for me. As soon as I got a car, I was out of rural Shawnee County and here hanging out on Mass Street. Lawrence was a safe place for me to be myself, to hold my boyfriend's hand walking down Massachusetts Street. And since moving here, I've come to realize, though, that Lawrence doesn't offer that same safety to build my life, my career, my future to all residents. I think that we can, through smart, ambitious, and bold policymaking, live up to our professed progressive values as a community. My background is Director of Advocacy at Kansas Appleseed, a nonprofit policy advocacy organization. I supervise staff across the state of Kansas with offices in Wichita, Pittsburgh, Dodge City, and here in Lawrence. I also work in the State House to advance policy around food stamps. We have a lawsuit against the state for foster care, juvenile justice. This kind of activism and progressive policymaking is what I want to bring to City Hall. Thank you.
So, my name is Ken Easthouse, first of all, and I prepared a 90-minute speech, so I kind of had to wing it right at the moment for 60 seconds. I am currently the Vice Chairman of the Public Incentives Review Committee, formerly the Chairman of the Public Incentives Review Committee. I am also currently the President of the Prairie Park Neighborhood Association. My core issue, if you have to distill it down to one thing, is that many of our city policies have been fighting against each other. And I strongly feel that we need to get our city policies aligned in such a way that we are not fighting ourselves, spending excess money in ways that force us to be inefficient in our goals and visions as a community. And we'll be talking much more about that here throughout the rest of the evening. I have 15 seconds left, but I'm going to concede my time. Thank you.
Impressive. Okay. Thank you all very much. And I know that 60 seconds went super fast.
Yeah.
So thank you. Okay, onward to the questions. And we'll start with Rob, since we started with Stuart. All right, let me read this one to you. Douglas County is experiencing serious income and poverty disparities by racial or ethnic group. According to the most recent health equity study, the Black population has statistically significant higher rates of poverty, 25.9%, than both the Douglas County rate, which is at 19.2%, and the white poverty rate, which is at 17.6%. What steps would you take to make sure Lawrence is a more equitable city and address the poverty rate?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the main thing that we can do at City Hall is to adopt policies and make decisions that are housing positive, addressing the rising costs of housing for all swaths of the community. Frankly, there's some practices that have been put in place in the last 2 generations that a lot of much larger communities in the nation have been struggling with how to figure out how to correct some of the poor lending practices, the zoning restrictions, and there are communities that are struggling with how to figure that out. And Lawrence, as all other communities, has a part in that. We've got to correct a lot of our history in order to bring certain parts of our community up to the same standard of living. It's not going to be easy. It's to correct 2 generations of this practice is going to take quite a long time, but I think addressing rising housing costs, addressing utility rates are 2 things we can do. I would also say that the city being an advocate in the creation of small businesses will allow people to put their own dreams forward.
I think we need to continue to work with our local partners, especially Douglas County, to provide stable funding for the health department. In addition to getting this data from the health equity report, the health department is an important access point for all low-income people here in the city and in Douglas County. The health equity report doesn't exactly recommend, but it does suggest that residents earning less than $35,000 are more likely to struggle with access. So we need to realize that jobs is really one of the biggest parts of what we're going to have to address as the next commission. And then the other thing that I think will be important when we talk about affordable housing is the health equity report showed that low-income people are concentrated in certain areas of town. So we need to be very conscious and focus on making sure that we scatter affordable housing around to give people access to different neighborhoods, different opportunities, different schools, and I think really is the healthiest thing for people who are trying to move up.
Okay, so this is my bread and butter at work, anti-poverty policy. We do a lot of work like around Medicaid expansion, etc., driver's license suspensions, and I've also done my research about what policies are available at the local level. But at the very beginning, the 2018 Health Equity Report was a call to action for me, right? Like the consequences of these disparate poverty rates affecting Black residents over white residents translates into 5-year shorter life expectancy for Black residents in Lawrence than white residents. If you live in North Lawrence or East Lawrence, your life expectancy is 8 years less on average than in other parts of our community. Like, we have to recognize that that is related to historic divestment in those sides of town, and we have to move forward committed to using race as a lens in all policy decisions moving forward. And that's why a racial disparity impact note has been on our agenda since day one. Just like a fiscal note, you need to know how much a policy or a project is going to cost. We also need to know how projects and policies are going to differently affect residents of color. If we don't do that, then we're going to continue making policy in a colorblind way and exacerbating these structural racist structures at the core of our community. We can also ban the box in housing and employment. Those have been on our platform since day one as well. When I rented my most recent place, I was doing a background check with the individual, and she kind of made a joke like, "I hope you're not a criminal." What if I was? Like, what if I had a record? I would not have been able to live where I do now.
These issues are really kind of the core of what it is to be in city government, first and foremost. Making sure that every one of your citizens has equal access to your various services and an equal standard of living in your community. On one hand, these numbers are something to absolutely tackle, and the Lawrence Douglas County Health Department has done an amazing job in putting together the Health Equity Report, which is a report that not many communities get in the United States. When you compare the report to national trends, Lawrence is doing slightly better than the national trend, so I would argue that we are doing good, not great, in some of these issues, and that many of the issues are systemic in nature, and we can't tackle them alone. We need help from the State House, and we need help from the national government as well. Things that we can do locally, though, increasing our affordable housing processes, like Courtney says, making sure that those affordable housing options are spread out through the entire city and not just concentrated in certain areas in town. We need to make sure that, as Rob said, make sure there's economic opportunities for anyone who wants them in town. I have a proposal to increase our economic development proposals to target those small businesses specifically that put down roots in the community and are the source of job growth for our future. That is where our key lies in differentiating ourselves in the community.
One of the things that we do at the city is we use some of the special alcohol tax revenue that we generate to fund the Boys and Girls Club. Boys and Girls Club does an excellent job of working with kids after school and in the summertime. And one of the things that's really significant there with the summertime work is that the kids who are in Boys and Girls Club are really ready to come back and go to school again. They don't lose over the summer the way some of their peers do. So that's something that is entirely appropriate for the city to do with that special alcohol tax revenue. With regard to the Health Equity Report from Douglas County, which has been referred to, I think we need to be open to understanding that there are some structural problems around how we fund the health department. We have a joint health department with Lawrence and Douglas County, so both the city and the county write checks to the health department. And one of the aspects of this is that Lawrence property owners pay 75% of all the tax that Douglas County receives in property tax. So the city doesn't have to write a check for you to actually be supporting the health department. You support it through your county tax dollars. And the effect of this is that people in North and East Lawrence are paying twice for the health department, where people out in the unincorporated areas are paying once. So you're shifting the burden from people who are more able to bear it onto people who are less able to bear it, who are more diverse and have fewer resources.
Thank you all very much. And question number 2. What do you view as the city's... Sorry.
We start with Courtney.
We'll start with Courtney. Yes. Courtney starts this time. Okay. Number 2, what do you view as the city's role in ensuring Lawrence is a community that supports safe, stable, and nurturing relationships and environments for children, families, and individuals?
We need to continue, well, let me start over. This community knows the difference between an expense and an investment. And we need to continue to provide as much funding as possible to the programs we know support families and children. We need to continue investing in our healthy built environment, sidewalks and bike paths. We should definitely not close the community building as a cost-cutting measure. That is an access point for lots of families and children, for all kinds of recreational opportunities that have long-term health benefits that ultimately result in a cost savings. Again, when something is an investment, you're not as interested maybe as a bureaucrat in slashing funding. You're interested in what the long-term benefit is. And we have consistently shown in this community that that's what we care about.
Okay. So for me, this is like my bread and butter. I work in child hunger, I work in child welfare, I work in juvenile justice reforms in the state legislature, but also here in town too. I participate in the Poverty and Jobs Working Group for the Community Health Plan. I'm also actually have already taken an oath of office. I'm on the Extension Council for Research and Extension Douglas County. So 4-H, food stamps, Master Food Volunteers, those are programs that I get to see touching the lives of children and making sure that families are thriving in Douglas County. For me, my proposals work around what I know best, so using the city to collaborate on summer meal programs, making sure we maximize that federal feeding program for our children in the summertime. Also, after-school meal programs like with Boys and Girls Club. There are thousands of students going to Lawrence Public Schools who do not currently enjoy after-school suppers who qualify for them. But other ideas that I would like us to consider are parental leave for public employees for the city, access to pre-K. In Pittsburgh, Kansas, they have a wonderful collaboration between the college, the city, and nonprofits, and they use that to leverage state and federal dollars, and it's very successful. And then lastly, I think we should restore funding for school therapists through the Burt Nash RAP program. From what I understand, funding hasn't reached pre-2008 recession levels yet, and it's over a decade later.
So what is the city's role in providing a safe, stable, and nurturing relationship and environment for children, families, and individuals? Step one is really we're a partner. Those nonprofits, those families, those other community partners, we're all in this together, first and foremost. And the city should be a resource center where if there's a problem that you're experiencing, certain poverty rates you're struggling, you should be able to come to the city and tell us what your problem is, and we can at least point you to the right resource of what we can do. But that involves being comfortable and to come to your city officials for that. I can honestly say I don't know a whole lot of people who would feel comfortable coming to City Hall and expressing certain issues in front of the City Commission presently. And that's a problem. That's something that we have to address in making sure that the citizens of Lawrence, when they have these issues, when they have problems in the community that maybe we're not aware of at City Hall, that you feel comfortable bringing those to us. And I can't honestly say that many people do so right now. And that's got to be the first step before we do any sort of policy implementation, is rebuilding that trust between the community and the stakeholders and City Hall.
I think what we can do is do our jobs really well. We have a strategic plan that talks about safe, healthy, and welcoming neighborhoods. We need to have infrastructure that supports that. We need to have excellent public safety services, police, fire, and medical, and have Parks and Rec that provides the programming and the park space that our community wants. Those are the things that the city's role in this all primarily is. We also have some economic development responsibilities and working in affordable housing. There are all kinds of things that the city in its role has the opportunity to help with the safe, stable, and nurturing relationships environment. But I'd like to talk about neighborhoods. We did a ribbon cutting at Ludlam Park for the toddler playground. That's an amazing improvement to that facility. And people showed up, and that's where we want to be. Derek Rogers talked about how he grew up across the street from that park, and that was so important to him. And that's the sort of thing that the city can do through our agencies to support families.
Does anyone follow Family Promise on Facebook? Couple, yeah. They had a thing out there today, they had a post out there that said that child care costs cost as much or more than a education per year at a university, like $9,000 or so dollars. I think that's one area where the city can work collaboratively to attempt to reduce some of those costs, because especially not just the after-school care, not just the care while kids are in school during the summer, but that pre-K education when parents are struggling mightily to provide for their family, care for their children, and be more than just reasonably assured that their child is in a safe environment. I think that's incredibly important. And if we can figure that one out, then we're making some headway. I would also like to talk about the Parks and Recs programs. I've had the opportunity to talk to several of the sports clubs that work directly with Parks and Rec. And these clubs are worried about the increase in participation fees for their club sports. And they don't want, and by the way, they also mention arts education, STEAM education that is funded by City Hall. They want all of that to continue. Thanks.
Great, thank you all. Okay, so Joey, you're up first next. Okay, number 3, according to an October 11th article in the Lawrence Journal World, lower to mid-level housing is severely limited in our community, which ostracizes our lower income families wanting to invest in a permanent residence. What are your ideas about how to keep those families invested here in our community if they cannot afford to live here?
Great. So for me, it requires bold, creative policy solutions and collaborations. At work, when we're talking about what moves the needle most for working class families, it's rent and housing costs, utilities. Other than wages, unfortunately, we can't do a lot around that right now. So for me, these solutions and collaborations look like all sides of town needing to pitch in to be a part of the solution. When we knock doors and we talk to neighbors in East Lawrence, that is not the current perception. In fact, most people feel and have reason to feel that most of the burden falls on them when it comes to solving our city's housing problems. That cannot continue. For me, also, I look to other cities like Burlington, Vermont to, in fact, restructure our housing market locally. In Burlington, Vermont, up to 7% of all of their housing stock is in their nonprofit housing trust. And so we can do that here locally, expand the stock dramatically, and increase the number of programs that help seniors and folks on fixed incomes stay in their homes longer, rehabilitate old buildings into permanently affordable condominiums, etc. We can get creative and look to other cities that are doing well. But also, one of the biggest power dynamics in the city is the relationship between landlords and renters. The city should get on the side of renters because affordability means nothing to you if your house is unsafe or unhealthy. And so the city should also increase its rental inspection policies, A dismal number of units are inspected regularly. And also get on the side of renters when it comes to absentee landlords who don't respond to maintenance requests.
So any conversation about affordable housing is going to be much more complex than we can answer fully in a 90-second response. For those interested in a truly comprehensive look, I posted a YouTube video on my website. It's about 25 minutes long total to really explore in depth the causes of our affordable housing issues here in Lawrence. But in summary, our housing stock is unfortunately incredibly low because there's just not room to build. Part of it is our annexation policy, specifically Plan 2040 does restrict our annexation unless it provides some sort of community benefit. Unfortunately, housing stock being so low is not a community benefit as it is worded presently. What that does is artificially inflate overall land prices, inflates overall housing prices, and creates an undue pressure on the supply-demand curves normally in the area. So one of my proposals is to open up that annexation policy so we can build more affordable houses. Our population is growing to the point where we can't just sit in our own footprint for too much longer. That's not how our population growth curve is looking over the next even 10 years. Secondly, we do need to look at economic development opportunities in order to help people get out of that low income status, and that's going to grow when we invest in our economic development policy specifically for small businesses in the community.
The sales tax increment that was passed to provide funding for the trust fund, the housing trust fund, is one tool that we can use. I think that there are others that we can bring to bear on this problem. One of the things, I live in the Schwebler neighborhood, and there are a lot of modest houses in that neighborhood that are student rentals. When Tom Marcus came in from Iowa City, he told us about a program called the University Program, where the city would acquire rental properties in the, near downtown or near the university, and bring them up to code, and then sell them as permanently affordable housing. I'd love to see that in my neighborhood. There are plenty of modest houses in this community, but we're not building new modest houses. But if we can reclaim some of those for affordable housing, and Tenants to Homeowners has recently acquired its first property in my neighborhood, I believe, and I'm happy to welcome them there. We need to do other things like establish a community development financial institution that could provide leveraging through government funds, through philanthropic contributions, and then also some investor funds to be able to help families with down payment assistance, things like that. So there are things we can do, and we just need to expand our scope to these other tools.
So I've been talking about affordable housing from the start, and the key to fixing this, if we can fix it, is to use every tool that we have available. And that's not just for affordable housing, because we do have a very good toolkit for addressing affordable housing for those that are housing insecure and need help the most. And we should always continue to help those folks. But we've got a pretty serious impact in the $100,000 to $250,000 bracket. Some people call it workforce housing. I prefer the term missing middle. And what that means is folks that are trying to enter the housing market may be unable to do so. It also affects rental rates for those homes. So we've got to adopt policies and make decisions at the city commission level that allow people to choose where they want to live and how they want to live. I'll give you another example. If you choose to rent in an apartment or a condo or a townhome, most of those it can be modest density, it can be modest human scale homes that just slightly tick up the density a little bit. Thanks.
This is the worst part about being last. Now you just have to say yeah. Everybody said it all already. Yes, I agree with these gentlemen on a number of these points. It's shameful when our own educators of our children have to commute out of town because they can't afford to live here. And Ultimately, it has been a shortfall of planning. We've overbuilt student housing, we've overbuilt hotels and high-end luxury homes. But, you know, as several people have mentioned, that medium area is missing in our market. So we need to find innovative ways to encourage development in that mid-range. And we really haven't attacked that at all. Another thing that no one else has mentioned particularly, but just to throw it out there, we talked a little bit before about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund perhaps providing vouchers and rent relief. So those are some different things, but I agree with all these gentlemen. We have to really start being innovative and aggressive with it.
Okay, thank you all. Question 4, and I'll start with you, Ken. Okay. Domestic violence requires a coordinated response between many agencies: advocacy, court, mental health, hospital, and the police, to name a few. What do you see as the city's role in maintaining victim safety, particularly in regard to police response?
You know, when we were given this question, I struggled with it quite a bit. I am fortunate that I've never been involved in any sort of domestic violence incidents. None of my family has been. I'm very fortunate to not be an expert on this particular issue. When it comes to the city's response and how we handle it, specifically when it comes to police, I think any additional training we can give to our police officers responding to domestic violence incidents so that we don't exacerbate issues. We have to work with our community partners, in particular Willow and the community shelter and any other nonprofits that are in the area that I might be forgetting, because they're the front lines at this point in time. You know, I fully admit I'm not an expert in this area, and I'm going to defer my judgment to those who are experts. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert at something I'm not. But all the experts say that we need increased police training, we need to work with our community partners to ensure the privacy of victims is at our forefront, is our first priority. And that's what I intend to do and intend to advocate for on the City Commission.
I think the city's role is to support the efforts of the police department as they work in this area. And one of the things that I've done as an incumbent on the city commission was to support the police station effort. That was a fraught topic 5 years ago, and the sales tax vote failed, and it's been controversial, but you know, we had, frankly, good leadership from Mayor Mike Amix on this issue, and we voted to increase property taxes to pay for the new police station. One of the aspects of the police station will be that they'll be able to separate victims from alleged perpetrators. In the current space, there's a central hallway, and there's a chance that these folks will run into each other, and that's not a good thing. So with the new police station that we did a groundbreaking on recently, there will be more support, better resources for the police to be able to do the job that they need to do to keep our community safe.
So, I have had very little training in this, but I have had it through the U.S. Army. They take domestic abuse training for everybody very seriously. And so we are taught at a very low level how to attempt to intervene and identify when these situations are happening. From what I understand, violence becomes worse when the victim either cannot be removed or refuses to leave from the situation. The next incident is always random, and it's always worse. Policing is becoming more and more about addressing these very nuanced and sensitive areas, such as this, and how our police interact with those with mental disabilities or mental or behavioral health issues. It's becoming more about addressing this for officers who are at the absolute lowest level of policing, the patrolmen and the supervisors, patrolmen, women, and the supervisors. I think the role of a city commissioner in this is to bring concerns to the chief of police, ensure that Chief Burns is applying training dollars so that officers are well trained in how to identify these things and make the right decision when they can.
Yeah, we have a great partnership in the Willow Domestic Violence Center. They regularly engage, obviously, with Lawrence Police Department. There are some practices that could enhance safety. Again, if we could keep nurturing this relationship, listen to the experts, not just in October, which is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So 2 actual concrete things we could do at the city level. We could train our officers to conduct lethality assessments when they're responding to calls. And we can provide more training for them on trauma-informed care for the officers. So those are 2 things that are concrete, actual things that we can do at the city level. It's so nice to know that there's something concrete, that some action we can take to prepare.
Okay, so for me this is near and dear. When I was still on KU's campus in 2010, 2011, we were having a pre-Me Too movement, or a moment where KU institutionally was failing to respond to several domestic, several sexual assault accusations, etc. And I was a part of the September Siblings group. We named ourselves after the February sisters. And so, through that process I learned quite a bit from friends who have survived and others. But for me, policy-wise, it involves becoming a sanctuary city, making sure that immigrants and undocumented neighbors know that they can go to the police if they have experienced domestic violence. Currently, that's not the case right now. Walking with a friend who volunteers consistently at Willow, she told me there are several cases where that's happening right now, where a woman cannot go to the police because she is terrified of deportation. It also involves making sure that we have increased transparency and accountability for our local police. So that means getting the Police Citizen Review Board up and running. From what I understand, it has not met once since its creation. I think this is really critical too, because of the recent article in the Kansas City Star, where we saw a local detective who led an investigation of a KU student accused of making a false rape report. He decided that she was lying the same day she made her report. So we need this review board up and running to rebuild trust.
Okay, thank you. All right, number 5, and we're back to Stuart. Are there any models for addressing homelessness and human services that other cities have utilized that appeal to you, and why?
I'm struggling to identify any in Kansas. In Kansas, the responsibility for these types of programs really rests with the county. And we've partnered with Douglas County in increasing the funding that we provided to the Lawrence Community Shelter for the next year. And the county actually increased theirs more than we did. We matched at $296,000. They raised their contribution from $115,000. And I think that we need to remember that we are citizens of Douglas County, and that Lawrence property owners pay 75% of the property taxes that Douglas County receives. So that when Douglas County does a program like social service program or something like supporting the Lawrence Community Shelter, we are actually participating through our county citizenship, through our county tax dollars. And what we need to do is have these conversations with the county about their responsibilities and make sure that these services flourish as the city of Lawrence refocuses our resources on city-specific problems. I really am interested in these services flourishing as we make that transition.
It's a difficult question because I read a lot of articles from City Labs, Smart Towns, APA, others, hundreds of articles, about what cities are trying to do to address affordable housing, housing the homeless, etc. And one thing I want to make clear is that each of these situations, they have a different constitution, so they have a different law structure. However, having said that, I don't know if I have not found examples where cities have done particularly well. I have found examples where cities have done particularly detrimental, have implemented particularly detrimental policies. I'll give you one. Triple H in LA County was going to use city bonding to construct affordable housing. And you can imagine what happens when the government tries to really get that deep into fixing a problem. It wildly failed. They still haven't even opened one housing unit yet, and they have exceeded $800,000 over the median household, over the median home price in LA County. They've exceeded that price per unit. So what we have to do in Lawrence, and I think it's key, what we have to do in Lawrence is accelerate the success that we're having with community partners in Burt Nash, LCS, and others.
Yeah, so I'm going to say Finland. Finland has found some solutions. It is a housing first approach, which is in line with, as Rob was suggesting, Burt Nash, Lawrence Community Shelter, Douglas County Community Fund have been discussing. And again, this is about knowing the difference between an expense and an investment. One thing in Finland that they recognize is that the program costs money, but it saves money in the long term. The other thing I think they did was do a really good job of asking private owners to accept vouchers, which I don't think we do enough of here, and to donate units, which we could do a lot of promotion. If you actually donate land to the trust, it's quite a savings in taxes for you. We don't really advertise that. And we don't really think about homelessness in terms of prevention, which to me seems like a real shift of mindset for us that could lead to real change.
Great, so this hits home for me. My father has experienced homelessness, and to me, it is morally outrageous that camps are being bulldozed north of the river while luxury condos or luxury apartments sit empty downtown, right? Like those luxury apartments were built with our tax handouts, though our neighbors need shelter. We know too that it is more expensive to leave our unhoused neighbors unsheltered. They need more services when they're sleeping out in the elements. And so it is fiscally responsible and morally right to make sure that we house our neighbors and fund the shelter properly. We also need to realize how close all of us are to homelessness, or some of us are to homelessness. Just getting my hair cut today, my hairdresser was saying that she has an MA, but she's a single mother and there's no jobs in her field. And she is, 1-2 paychecks away from not being able to make rent. Lastly, we absolutely should look for a housing first approach. You could learn about it from the new director Renee's interview on KCUR, but also we can look to Topeka. They have launched into a citywide housing first approach. It's proven to address chronic homelessness in other cities, and it's more cost effective and the right thing to do. And for me, it's about working together to provide services to make sure folks are getting on their own 2 feet and can participate in a happy, healthy life.
one of the best town's programs that I had ever seen to address homelessness, and the underlying causes of homelessness was our own shelter, even a few years ago. The intake process for the community shelter, and I worked with them closely as the president of the Prairie Park Neighborhood Association. We had quarterly, even monthly meetings at one point in time on the progress that they were making. Their intake process included addressing each individual cause of that person's homelessness. Was it a lack of a job? Was it a mental health issue? And they would kind of silo folks into addressing the causes of the homelessness and allowing them to get back on their feet and eventually exit the shelter to be a more productive member of society. That was such a unique and innovative approach as I had ever seen at that point in time. And unfortunately, some of the cost-cutting measures that happened with the current shelter is that a lot of those programs have fallen by the wayside. And that, I think, is a shame, because that was such a unique issue with our shelter, and I'd like to see us reinstitute that. If possible, if we need some more funding, hey, let's talk about some funding issues, because I do think it is an investment into our community. It is not necessarily a cost, especially when you look at the long-term costs there.
Thank you. All right, number 6. Lawrence has a vibrant and active arts and culture community. How can the city work with that community to ensure the continued strength of the arts and culture in Lawrence and enhance the lives of our residents?
This is a great question. I briefly touched on it earlier when I mentioned talking about sporting clubs that were organizing sports for our youth. One of the things they consistently mentioned was wanting to create more opportunities for youth to get involved in the arts. And so I thought that was it was incredible. Here you've got folks talking about league sports that recognize the importance of an hour of play a day for young kids, but they're also advocating to keep arts in education and have venues for it outside of the school district or the school. This last budget process, I would have done it a little bit differently, specifically with the scholarships that were being applied to Lawrence Arts Center right here. We need to continue those programs, but we also need to make decisions and adopt policies that make art more of a part of our community. We say we do that, but really the regulatory hurdles that it would take to go through to get, a mural on the side of a private building might violate the sign code, for example, or public art piece has to cost this much and go here, and et cetera, et cetera. We can be more flexible.
So I'm going to say it again. This community knows the difference between an expense and an investment. Funding spent on all arts, cultural events, there's a financial return that goes with that, especially here in Lawrence. If we want to capitalize on our reputation as an arts town, which we should, we have to invest in those kinds of programming. When I hear that private investors with a wind energy company are investing in STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, math programs here at the Art Center, I can't ignore that. That's an incredible collaboration. We should be supporting that. That's an investment in our future. I also agree with Rob. I was a little disappointed that the transient guest tax got cut a little bit this year. Again, the things that get that funding can show, the Free State Festival, for example, Busker Festival, Live on Mass, they can show actual money that it generates from tourist dollars. It doesn't just bolster the community, it provides a return. And, you know, when we have Wichita or Emporia investing $50,000 in arts programming or film festivals, we should think about what we could be doing here a little bit stronger to support that.
Yeah, so I grew up on art. My mom's career is in parks and recreation, so, you know, pottery classes when I was a toddler, watercolor classes when I was in middle school, after school arts and crafts, like putting little, I don't know, washer, like cotton balls on sticks and calling it Santa Claus. You know, those programs have big impacts on small developing minds. Also providing structured places for children to go and grow and learn are really powerful for their development. And for me too, I have taken pottery classes here with my partner. It was a fun Saturday thing that we did together. We didn't do the ghost thing though, but so yeah, making sure that we fund the arts is critical. And the last thing I want to say is that we should support public art. It was bonkers how difficult it took, or how the process was for the Women of Color mural. We should streamline that process, thank artists who want to share their talents with our community, not throw up walls. And lastly, like art, you know, art has value in and of itself. It's not something to enhance profits for developers. So, you know, it makes Lawrence unique. It makes Lawrence great. We should be maximizing those unique traits that we have.
After I announced my candidacy for City Commission, I made a handful of phone calls. My mom, my grandparents, and then I wanted to call Megan Morris here at the Arts Center. And I wanted to make sure that she knew that I had her back. Not only as one of the leaders of the arts community here in Lawrence, but for our commitment to the Arts Center in Lawrence as well. What art and culture means to Lawrence is really the defining thing of what makes us different than a Topeka or an Emporia or any other community in Kansas. This place wouldn't happen in any other town in Kansas. And I think we have to understand and recognize that that's part of our culture. That is part of who we are. And we have to make that commitment to ourselves, because this place is part of the reason why people want to move to Lawrence. This place, you know, invests, you know, when you invest into arts, you invest into the kind of community that people want to move to, that companies want to move to, that, you know, that executives aren't going to move here just for basketball season 3 months out of the year. They're going to move here because of the kind of environment that the Lawrence Arts Center and our arts community develop in its place. We absolutely have to make sure that our support to the arts community is centered.
So it was fun hearing Joey's story about his early days in art. And I've got to reach back a lot further to find mine. But I recently took my mom to the 30 Americans exhibit over at the Nelson Atkins Gallery. And it was really fun for her to see that. She's 95 years old. And we were talking to the museum guard. We got a ride down on the little scooter she used to walk her. So anyway, so we got a ride down and we were talking. And it turns out that the first time she went to the Nelson Atkins was when she was a teenager. And she took me there when I was 5 years old, which is 60 years ago now, actually. But that was so I mean, I think that art is something we can share, and frankly, my participation was pretty bad because I'm not much of an artist. But the things that we can do are to continue to support the public library, continue to support the Arts Center. This is a city building. I mean, we are providing this space for the Lawrence Arts Center. Some of the things that we can do to enhance our relationships in arts and culture are to make sure that our relationships with our universities are strong, that we are, that we know about the Spencer, that we know about the Haskell Art Fair. I mean, there are all these opportunities that we can do, and Michael Davidson's here tonight. Explore Lawrence helps with that. But we are doing a lot, and we just need to continue and enhance our relationships with the university.
Number 7, Plan 2040. In 90 seconds, what is your vision?
Sorry, we were talking.
Who's on first?
Who's on first? Yeah, Plan 2040 is the vision. And then the 3 new commissioners will be privileged to use that as a roadmap to make our hopes for the future become a reality. We can't no longer afford to let our city be planned without consideration for sustainability, green infrastructure, green space, preserving sensitive land from inappropriate development, emergency services, schools, healthy built environment. Plan 2040 gives us a way to do that. And as we implement it, and it will take quite a bit of time, we'll finally have time to examine how to develop in a way that actually pays for itself in the future, which currently infrastructure particularly does not.
Yeah, so I'm a fan of Plan 2040. I appreciate its emphasis on growth and density. I think something really to consider that runaway growth, when we hand that out to developers, is just that, a handout. If we do not properly capture the cost to the environment and the cost of extending infrastructure and services into annexed areas, that's a handout. That is a cost that the city is absorbing that the developer is not. And so, for me, I am very interested in these kinds of policies and revenue policies that we can do that. And yeah, I understand that margins are thin in development game, but so are the margins for working class families, so are the margins for so many residents in town. So for me, I'm most excited about how the plan can be used to advance a new climate protection plan. We have one currently from 2009. We're embarking on a new one. And I think that we really need to follow the science, work on ways to decarbonize our local economy and build a more resilient neighborhood so we take care of each other as we go into an increasingly unknown and extreme future. And then also too, transportation. I hope with the new director for transportation we can get innovative, making sure that not only do the buses run on Sundays, but also that the buses really respond to use.
Plan 2040 has been, and I'm sure Stuart can agree with this, an incredibly long and detailed process that dozens of folks in our community have poured countless hours into, and I'm very grateful for that fact. That being said, my one issue with Plan 2040 is the annexation policy. I have no qualms with community benefit being a requirement for any sort of annexation. I think that's good and responsible as a member of the community, and we want to make sure that we are annexing property correctly and not doing it in such a way that things can lead to runaway sprawl. That being said, one of the things that Commissioner Herbert proposed to add to that section to define what is a community benefit is housing needs. And as we discussed earlier, our housing needs are considerably high right now. We have very low inventory in terms of our housing at $250,000 and less, and that falls into those starter homes. Those are the types of homes that many people rent in this community. So when we look at that, I really would like to add a housing need into the community benefit portion of Plan 2040. Otherwise, it's an incredible document that many people have put a lot of work into.
As Ken pointed out, this has been an amazing community effort to come up with Plan 2040, and I'd like to express my gratitude to the folks who put it together, and also to the folks on the Planning Commission like Rob here, who really worked hard to consider it very deliberately. And so I'm very happy to adopt the vision that has been accepted by the community, which is Plan 2040. I think that we need to as Courtney said, over the next several years, over the next term, we'll be faced with the implementation aspects of it. And I think it's important to try to be devoted to the vision that's been put forward and not skew too far away from what we've done. So it's going to be difficult to implement, I think, but we need to honor the plan as it's been put forward.
So, I'm gonna put my nerd planning hat on for a minute. Overall, Plan 2040, good plan. I voted for it. It is in line with the current styles of comprehensive plans for communities in our size and others. So it's very much aspirational, as Scott McCullough likes to use that term. It's a high-level document, and it's made to inform the strategic plan of the city commission and then the specific plans of the city manager from year to year. I did vote for it, and if you want to know how I would act as a city commissioner, I had strong disagreement with the annexation policy, but I still voted for it because 98% of it I agreed with, 2% of it I didn't. That's part of the process. I still wanted to move the plan forward. We are going to be out of infill lots in about 2 years. If our construction rates go as they have been for the last 5 years, we're going to be out of infill lots in 2 years. So this aspirational annexation policy is going to come a lot faster than we all think. Our strategic plan that the city manager and the city commissioner puts together is a 2-year plan. We will see the end of infill development in 2 years in that next strategic plan. And we have got to adopt policies now that allow all tools for housing development.
So this is our last prepared question. So Joey, you'll go this time, and then Ken, you'll answer. You'll be on the spot for the wild card. Okay. Number 8. Given that utility rates will increase dramatically for water at 8%, solid waste 3%, and stormwater 3% in 2020, how do you plan to moderate or adjust these rates during your term if elected?
Yeah, so I have been honored to be endorsed by community leaders new and old, like Eileen Horn, Melissa Johnson, Kelly Jones, and Boog Heiberger. And one thing that Boog and I were talking about was the city's considerations of making a progressive rate structure when he was serving on the commission. When we did a candidate orientation with city staff, finally it seems that we are going to have the technical ability at the city level to do that. So the idea being that if you have a large lawn in West Lawrence and you're dumping water on it to make it look a certain way for a certain aesthetic, you should be paying more per gallon once you use a certain amount than the person who's using water to heat baby formula. And so absolutely that is kind of what we should do. And also though too, there are other ways that I think we could make our revenue policies a lot more progressive. In my opinion, the tax burden on the poor in Lawrence is way too high. And meanwhile, those who have enough, those who have more than enough, are getting tax handouts and tax incentives that they do not need, and their profits will always be there for them. So, that is our commitment in this campaign, is to look at all policies, utilities, development, etc., in a way that focuses low-income folks, working-class folks, residents of color, and making sure that the burden falls on those who have the means to afford it.
The topic of utility rate increases, to me, goes to the heart of affordable housing. It doesn't necessarily do you a whole lot of good to be able to afford to rent or buy a house if you can't afford to stay in it. And things like your water rates are part of that. To me, we are, as commissioners, as legislators, as leaders in the community, we have to be as focused to not raise our utility rates as we are not raising our mill levy. Both are detrimental to the community, and specifically with utility rates, that directly impacts our low-income communities at a much higher percentage than anyone else. I do like Joey's idea of the progressive utility rates. However, I do want us to study it before just jumping full into it. But we have to have a commitment from commissioners to understand that if you can't afford to live in your house, there's no point in having an affordable home. It's all part of the same picture. So when we look at the utility rates, I do want to do everything we can to not raise the rates, and I do think there's some money that's in the account specifically that would allow us to not have to necessarily raise those rates on a consistent basis every year, at least based on the budgeting that I've seen.
I'm thinking that we probably already adopted the incline block rates for the utilities. I think we've already done that. Utilities are enterprise funds, and so the cost of the service has to be borne by the rates. And we've been faced with infrastructure failures, especially in our water system. We had to put 2 new water towers up between the campus ministries and the Adams Alumni Center. Millions of dollars, borrowed the money, and now we're having the benefit of good, safe drinking water. We're also having trouble with our water mains. So we had a boil water order over on New York Street this summer. What I'd like to do is to try to expand the utility assistance program. We have a very, very minimal utility assistance program. And rather than moderating the rates, I think what we need to do is try to help those who are having the most trouble making their utility payments. And another thing that needs to happen is we need to manage our programs well. I mean, we need to make sure that we're getting value. That's where hiring and supporting a city manager who can do an excellent job and who can lead the staff as they do their jobs and provide us these services. That's so important to trying to keep the rates where they are as reasonable as possible.
Well, whether you call something a tax, a fee, an assessment, it all comes out of the same pocket, right? It all comes out of our pockets, collectively as citizens. I believe that the 8% increase for the water rate is inherently regressive. It's going to affect those who need help the most. And water is one of those things where if you happen to be fortunate enough to afford it, you can cut back if you choose to do so. And frankly, the city can choose to cut back on watering some of its assets as well. But if you can't afford to cut back, if you're not watering your yard every week, every month, everything like that, you really can't cut back too much on showers and drinking water. And I find it, I just think it's unfortunate we had to go to that increase. I would also say that once the bond payments are paid off on the water infrastructure, the city commission, in conjunction with the city manager, needs to take a very hard look at reducing those rates back down to pre-bond levels. Thanks.
Yeah, I think this is a sign that we haven't done very good long-term planning. It's usually recommended that with utilities, you do 10 to 20-year financial plans. And I think, as we said, we're only just now getting tiered rates. That was a recommendation made to us, I think, 10 years ago. It's pretty common practice around now. So the other thing is that the recommendation we got from that study was Tischler Buys, I think, was to not do customer classes fund. It's not best practices. It's not a clear reflection of what you're doing with your funds. So I would want to look at that very closely because, again, when you have a lot of low-income people For one thing, they won't necessarily approach you to use those funds. They may not, out of pride, they may not know those things are available. So that is not the first solution that I would look for. I would look for operating them properly in the first place. Of course, we're playing a little bit of catch up, obviously. But having a long-term financial plan would be a huge step.
Okay, great. Thank you all for answering all those questions. So, Ken, you're up first.
Oh boy.
What will you do to make sure the fireworks ordinance will be followed in the future? And you're not doing
Our fireworks ordinance. Oh boy. I think we have a pretty large policing presence in town, but I also think we can do more as a city to advocate just why exactly that law exists in town. We have, for the past few summers, we haven't necessarily been dry, so fires have not been at the top of it, but we have a significant number of veterans that live in our community, and those loud pops absolutely impact them. I have friends that have Purple Hearts that, our 4th of July tradition is sitting down with our headphones over and just playing video games because the loud pops really have a significant impact on them. So I don't know if there's much from an enforcement perspective that we can do too much more, but I think we need to be better advocates as city leaders as to why that law is in place, to trust in the judgment of our neighbors.
So I was talking to somebody about Tobacco 21, and they said, if you enacted in Lawrence, it'll be just like fireworks. Kids will just go to Eudora and Baldwin to pick them up. And so, I think if we're going to do Tobacco 21, we need to try to do it on a countywide basis. Now, I understand they like their fireworks in Eudora. I don't think it's possible to, encourage them to change their laws. But one of the things I kind of thought about when we were talking about Plan 24 was the idea, would it be possible to talk to the county commissioners and ask them if they would restrict the sales of fireworks in the urban growth area for Lawrence? That might reduce the amount of fireworks because some people might not want to go to Eudora and pick them up. I don't know, but it's a dicey question. We've been wrestling with it for a while, and I think it might be kind of a fun conversation to have with the county commissioners, and I'm willing to do it. So that's just, I think that the weather has a big impact on how much we do for fireworks too. In the last couple of years, it seems like it's rained a lot, so there's been a few. Anyway, I guess that's about it. Thanks.
The idea behind that was there were several areas throughout the city that still had shake roofs, and with drought conditions, so now we're seeing less and less shake roofs throughout town, and we're not in drought condition. Well, we got out of drought condition a couple of years ago. It's something I think you need to turn on and off as appropriate. And I know, Mel, I am a veteran. Three times I'm a combat veteran.
I live with one, so
I
we're on
know
the
you
same
do, Mel.
page.
I know. I'm 3 times a combat veteran. I like the 4th of July. It's an opportunity for me to teach my sons and his friends and their friends responsibility. I'm the one, because I used to blow things up, still do on occasion, for my profession. That's a joke, I don't really blow that much stuff up. It's an opportunity for me to provide sober oversight to my kids and their friends. You could make the same argument against firework bans as you could against deep frying turkeys, as you could against real Christmas trees in the home. These are things that, if not used responsibly, present a very real fire risk. And I understand the reason behind it. I think what we can do, because we have, we've had bad enforcement for years, and so what we can do is if we were to allow it, we could restrict the types of fireworks sold within the city limits and the UGA. I'm sorry, one more time. I'm sorry.
I agree, well, I see the logic of one of the commissioners currently who asks why we have ordinances we can't enforce. But there's a lot of reasons for this one, safety chief among them. And I think before we decide to scrap it or give up on it, there is a program I heard about, this is kind of a shot in the dark here, in DC where they couldn't have enough officers to give out parking tickets, so they trained citizens for actually a considerable number of hours to give out tickets. And I wondered, could this be a way that we could do this? Because people report it all the time, and of course by the time the authorities get there, there's nothing they can do about it, and there's no evidence, whatever. So I know everyone's laughing, but sometimes it's okay to think outside the box if you're really trying to solve a problem. So I'm going to throw that out there for you guys.
So our campaign has been endorsed by the firefighters union, so we better get the answer right. But also, I grew up in the county, in Shawnee County, and we definitely caught our native prairie grass on fire a couple times. We burnt it intentionally too, but not that time. So for me, I think I don't know enough about the current policy, but what I am worried about in this conversation is the aspect of enforcing and policing. It would be a horrible day if Independence Day was a day that a black youth experienced disproportionate policing, right? So whenever we talk about criminalizing or making a ban that requires enforcement, we really need to have these considerations about how the police are interacting with our neighbors and residents, and how to make sure that those interactions are safe and hopefully as minimal as possible. Minimalizing contact with the police is cost effective and safest for residents of color. So, not to turn a fun topic into a serious one, but that's it.
Okay, great. So we are coming up on our time limit at 8 o'clock. Now, Rob said that he can be here all night. I don't know if the rest of us want to stay, but we'd be happy to listen. We'll ask at least one more question. We only have 4. So, and the other 2 are similar in nature to something we've already discussed. So I will go with this one right now. And we're back to Stuart. Yes. What is your stand on the recommendations made to the City Commission by the Sanctuary Alliance to make Lawrence a sanctuary city?
That was a very interesting meeting that we had the other day. And I appreciate the efforts that went into the presentations from staff, from the attorney Daniel Trevino, and from the Sanctuary Alliance. We had extensive public comment on that, and there was great support for policies that would, essentially be welcoming and provide sanctuary to the undocumented community members who are here. My position on this is that we are not going to be the community that we want to be if people are living here and they don't feel safe calling for help when they need it from our fire, from our medical, and from our police services. When they have problems that need those services, they need to feel confident that they can reach out and call for that help. So what the challenge to the city is to enact policies that will provide that confidence. None of us are safe if some of us can't call for help. So, and the trajectory of this issue is that we heard all this comment, we sent the issue back to staff to review all the information that was generated and to come forward and codify some policies that will provide that confidence.
I watched that on YouTube, and it was far more. It was far more enlightening. I thought I had well researched this topic. I had contacted the Kansas City chapter of the ACLU previously, and asked them for some input on sanctuary city policies at the municipal level, specifically in Kansas. And I was heartened to see that Lawrence already has in place a couple of the policies that the ACLU recommended, as well as a couple of the policies that the Sanctuary Alliance mentioned. So I'm with Commissioner Ananda on this one. I don't care what we call it. Let's adopt the policies. Let's adopt the policies that are appropriate for us in this city, regardless of what we call it. Being in the Army for 19 years, I've worked with a lot of folks who came into service in the country, came into service of our country just so that they could get citizenship. And so this is an area where you may be surprised, but I take it particularly seriously. I think one thing that we can do better as a community is getting the word out to the populations that they should call the police if they need help. They should call fire service and EMS if they need help.
I worked with the Sanctuary Alliance to help them understand how the city operates, where the city connects with county, so that they would be clear about what they were asking for when they went into city commission. I think they were very successful. I think there is definitely a possibility. I think their requests are reasonable. I think we're going to have a lot more dialogue. We have to be very honest about it, is in discussing this with our first responders, because I believe their feeling will be that they need to respond to ICE if they show up thinking that ICE is just like the FBI or the Marshals. They are not. They do not operate the way that those organizations operate, and they do make people unsafe and cause a liability to our own officers. So when we have that dialogue, I think as a community it's actually going to be a really good opportunity to create dialogue with first responders, police officers, and get them to understand that, it is a safety issue, and the safety issue is that people will be willing to go to the police, go to the fire department when they need help.
Yeah, so I'm on the core leadership team for Sanctuary Alliance, and so I am obviously in favor. Lawrence, this is our thing, right? Like, our city is literally burned to the ground because we refuse to accept evil codified in federal law. And so we should do everything we can to resist the disgusting, anti-immigrant, xenophobic, racist laws at the federal level and protect our neighbors who are of equal worth and equal deserving to be a part of our community. Our undocumented neighbors add huge value to our community, like their culture, their arts, their love, but also money too, right? Like in Kansas, undocumented residents pay over 8% in state and local taxes. The top wealthiest 1% of citizens pay around 3.5% in local and state taxes. So, we should be the community that we were born into being, that we were the city forged in flames, standing up to slavery and federal evils, and we should do it again. I want to invite you all, though, because next, after the city, is the county, and that'll be a bigger push. So stick with the Alliance as we move forward to talk about the county jail and make sure those practices are keeping our folks safe as well. And then lastly, the outcome hopefully is to a larger conversation about community policing in general, and making sure that we protect the rights of all residents.
So I was there at the beginning of the evening the other night when we had the conversation. I He did have to leave, unfortunately, but I was there at least at the start of the conversation about the sanctuary city and wholeheartedly was endorsing that position. I was even in attendance several years ago when Lawrence first adopted the welcoming city policies, which codified several of the instances that Rob mentioned. That was the best thing I can describe it is almost a half step. The decision was made, they didn't want to necessarily go full sanctuary city at that point in time because of some federal dollars lawsuits that were going on at that point in time. I was a little bit disappointed at that point in time several years ago that we didn't take a firmer stand, that it seemed to be half-measured. I would fully endorse us going ahead and adopting the full sanctuary city resolution, in part because I think names do have value. I think we can call ourselves a welcoming city and adopt every policy in place, but until we can firmly say, yes, we are a sanctuary city, we have stood up to say that, I think it will be viewed as a half measure by members of the community and of the nation.
All right, thank you. You spoke about poverty. How do you plan to create jobs, high and medium paying? So Rob, I think you're up first for this one.
Okay. I dug into some data recently, and the highest amount of jobs created in Kansas were created by firms that had less than 5 employees. Second highest number, if you've been to a forum, you've heard this before from me already. Second highest number was 5 to 10, third highest number 11 to 15, et cetera, until we get to 50 employees. Those bands create the most jobs in Kansas over the last 40 years. So some of the things that we can easily do at the city level is make the application process for small businesses, for any business in particular, a lot smoother and easier. I talk to a lot of business owners, and I ask them the same question. When I know that they've opened a business, or they own a business, or maybe they're a managing partner of a franchise or something like that, I ask them the same question. How was your process with the city? And they give me the same answer. It was the most stressful. The most stressful, not developing a business plan, not going to the bank for a loan, not dealing with the landlord. It was the most stressful. We need commissioners that can work with the city staff and provide good informed leadership that can smooth those processes out. It really ought to be a bit more of a concierge service where we bring an application in, we say, you know what, you're a small firm, we're going to help you fill this out quickly. Thanks.
I could not all the way hear what you said yet. What did you?
Oh, you need a question.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, you spoke about poverty. How do you plan to create jobs, high and medium paying?
Yeah, I agree. We have a real valuable partner here, the Small Business Development Center. I think the work they do is very worthwhile. It's always going to be about collaborating with partners because obviously if we knew how to do it, we'd have done it already. Certainly when we're talking about expanding jobs, we have a Chamber of Commerce here. We fund that. We need to be sure that we're getting the most out of that relationship. Certainly we need to attract larger number of jobs. We've used some incentives that worked really well recently. We want to keep on the track. I think they were both catalysts though, unfortunately. Sorry, Ken. The steel work that's coming, I think it's bringing 80 jobs, and then the grandstand expansion, which I think immediately created 100 jobs. So those are the things we need to focus on, things that are working. And I believe when I also read earlier, that it's usually local businesses that expand that really create the most jobs. So maybe we haven't been focusing enough on that. Maybe we've been casting our net too wide. But whatever we're doing is not working, so we have to reevaluate.
Yeah, so I think we also need to consider that investing in families with affordable housing or et cetera, that's economic development. Child care and early education, that's economic development. When we put money in the pockets of working class folks and we make sure that they are economically stable enough to pursue fulfilling, thriving lives, they are going to add to our community. We are going to be able to build a more democratic, thriving economy that supports better paying jobs when we focus on working class families. For me too, I am interested in a vacancy tax. Too much of these storefronts downtown are owned by out-of-town places or out-of-town property managers, and they let storefronts sit vacant. And so, changing the calculation in their mind, making it so that they can't just sit on a property or a piece of land until they can get the exact price, the exact profit they want, would be helpful for us as well. And I have to say I am fairly skeptical of playing this game of what seems like whack-a-mole. We'll give you an incentive, Missouri will give you an incentive, we'll give you a better incentive. And so, if we work on building the kind of economy that we want here with thriving families, with healthy family budgets, we can do a lot to support the kind of economy we want.
So as a sitting member of the Public Incentives Review Committee, I get to see firsthand a lot of the economic data about Lawrence and what's been going on over the past few years. I tend to agree. We have been swinging for a home run and whiffing frequently. We recently got lucky, I would say, with the U.S. Engineering Works through the Catalyst program. Grandstand has always been a local success story. However, real job growth and development comes from those small businesses as they're growing and developing and putting roots into the community. And unfortunately, we have a small business development center that will help you get a small business started, and most of our public incentives to help your business grow are designed for larger businesses, 50 employees or larger. But we have nothing in terms of an incentive package, in terms of anything we can do from a policy perspective as a city for those small businesses, those 1 to 5 to 10 to 20 employee businesses that make up the bulk of businesses here in town. We need to create an incentive package for those businesses that are going from startup to small business, that are looking to grow, that are looking to put roots down into the community. Because those are the types of businesses that will sit here and grow and then thrive into the community. It's not going to be a plan that will create immediate dividends, but that's how you create long-term growth in terms of economic development.
Just this year, we hired a new city manager. Craig Owens started on July 1st. He spent the first 100 days of his tenure here visiting with many people around the community, trying to learn, getting out, and seeing what the circumstances of the city are. He met with 850 employees, and he provided his 100-day report on October 8th at the City Commission meeting. Because it was around 10:15, I think he kind of shortened it up a little bit, like I'm going to try to do with this. But I think that learning from Craig will be very important for the next commission. He has done economic development work in his career. And recently he was in Clayton, Missouri. He was there for some time. He is experienced in economic development work, and I am open to learning from him, to understand what we can do differently than we have in the past, what our assets and what we can use to bring to bear on economic development to bring in primary jobs. I mean, that's really what we're talking about, is primary jobs. And I think the next commission, as I say, will need to be open to ideas from our new city manager.
I think we're actually going to call it right there, because the last question really has already been covered. and then affordable housing, which I think we've touched on several times already. So we really appreciate you all being here and answering questions. Thank you all for being here and being involved and being part of our democracy. Onward. Vote.